This was something savage. It scared the community.
A brutal attack.
She had at least 10 fractured ribs, fractured larynx, bruises all over her body.
By posing her and making her look like some type of a sexual deviant, she is basically being humiliated after the end of her life.
A twisted tale with multiple suspects.
He is being so secretive, he's being so careful to cover his tracks.
Maybe they did have a sexual relationship. Maybe something went wrong. Or was it some unknown subject that we had in our community that enjoyed doing this?
Everybody is a suspect.
The truth will be revealed.
She was doing some online dating, and whoever killed her is in her computer, and that'll tell you all you need to know.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Deer Park, Washington, 20 miles north of Spokane. It's a nature lover's paradise.
It is full of fun things to do, both winter and summer. People come here to take their vacations. It's such a nice town. And so we feel lucky to live here.
It's not overly crowded. People know people still. Everyone knows their neighbor.
Deer Park is a quiet place, and it's not known for violent crimes. Maybe property crimes, some family disputes that we deal with.
But on a chilly December evening, the quiet safety of the town would be violently disturbed when police get a call from a distraught man looking for his ex-wife, Shannon Starbuck.
He asked for a deputy to respond to her house to do a welfare check. He explained to the deputy that it was totally uncommon for her to take off and be gone for periods of time. Responding deputies walked around the house, looked through the windows, looked for signs of forced entry. Is there some kind of foul play here? At the time, they did not have enough probable cause or reasonable suspicion to enter this residence without a warrant.
The next day, police get another call, this time from her panicked mother.
According to her mother, they spoke at 9 a.m. in the morning on a daily basis. And it had been 2 mornings that they had not spoken. And that prompted officers to respond again. They were able to obtain a key, and they made entry at that time and discovered the body.
Detectives Mike Ricketts and Lyle Johnston of the Spokane County Sheriff's Office rush to the scene.
There was no signs of a break-in. I didn't see anything obvious within the living room. When I entered the master bedroom, here is this white female that's in her mid-30s or so, laying on the bed.
She was laying on her back, face up. She had bruising near her neck area and some bruising around her facial area. The bruising itself would indicate to me that she was beat. There were no knife wounds. There were no gun wounds. Considered a possibility that was suffocation or strangulation. There was a robe that was kind of awkwardly placed on her. There was a massage vibrator type of device that people would use to massage their muscles that was wrapped inside of that robe awkwardly. Not like she had done that. She was posed that way.
Detectives confirm the woman is 42-year-old Shannon Starbuck.
Shannon was a lovely, vivacious woman. She was married to a man named Clay, and they had recently become divorced.
Now, they had 5 children. 2 older boys lived with Clay, and the 3 younger, the 2 girls and the youngest son, lived with Shannon.
She was vibrant, she was beautiful, she was kind. She was also going back to school that time. She was restarting her life.
Who would break into the home of a lovely woman, the mother of 5 children, and do such a horrible thing to her? This was something savage. It scared the community.
To catch her killer, detectives will need to piece together the last 24 hours of Shannon Starbuck's life. They start by processing the crime scene.
I didn't find any sign of a struggle inside the bedroom. We collected DNA swabs from her neck and under her fingernails. All of the blankets from the bed were inside the wash machine, which was just right outside the master bedroom door. And the front of the wash machine had been completely wiped down. And appears to be some type of cleanup of the crime scene to hide any potential evidence that may have been left on the bed by the suspect. At the foot of the bed is what appears to be a safe. And inside there are several sexual toys that are staged in a way so that they could be obviously seen from anyone who's walking past.
Detectives start working up a profile on Shannon's killer.
By posing her and making her look like some type of a sexual deviant, she is basically being humiliated after the end of her life. This would appear to be someone that has some type of a vendetta against Shannon to take this much time and effort to make her look this bad.
Is it somebody that was close to her, that knows her, that was angry with her, wanted to get back at her? Or was it some unknown subject that we had in our community that enjoyed doing this?
The first person detectives want to speak with is Shannon's ex-husband, Clay Starbuck.
Oftentimes in these type of investigations, we're going to look at the domestic partner or the ex.
The sad reality is these are the vast majority of the offenders who are taking the lives of women. It's not the stranger hiding behind the bush. It's not a serial killer. It's the people that have already been in their lives.
I met Clay, and I said, "Hi, I'm Detective Dressbeck. I understand you have some questions." He said, "Yeah. I want to know what's going on. Nobody will tell me anything." I said, "You don't know what happened?" He said, "No, nobody will tell me anything." So I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but your wife was found dead in her bedroom." And he just collapsed on the floor. And it's prudent and appropriate as an investigator to give them room to react in whatever fashion they're gonna react. At one point, he even excused himself, went into the bathroom, and I could hear him heaving like he was throwing up. Like this was very traumatic to him.
After Clay gets over the shock of Shannon's death, detectives ask him when he last saw his ex-wife.
Clay Starbuck had told us that he had a small car that didn't run very well. So on the day in question, he starts the car up. He drives it around this community area where he lives in Deer Park. And it stalls approximately 2 to 3 blocks from Shannon Starbuck's house.
I was cranking and trying to start it. It didn't start. And I texted Shannon and said, you know, like, car quit, can you take the kids? And she texted me and said, okay. And so she took the kids to school. So I walk home.
He gets back to his house and then he goes to sleep because his back is hurting. And at that time, his phone must have died because the battery wasn't charged.
Clay says he went back to work on his car from 11:10 a.m. until 3:30 p.m., returning to his home a number of times during the day to get more tools.
2:45 p.m., The children were out of school and texted Shannon asking where she was, who's going to pick me up.
Shannon was supposed to go to the school and pick up the children, and she doesn't arrive.
In the late afternoon, while his phone was dead, Clay says he missed a number of texts.
3:17 p.m., Shannon texted Clay asking if he could pick up the kids. And that was the last text from her phone that afternoon.
She says something like, I just got up. Can you get the kids? But my phone wasn't on. And so Austin left work and picked up the kids.
Clay wasn't worried at that point because he thought he would see Shannon later that night.
There was a basketball game one of the oldest sons was playing in at the high school that evening. And Shannon usually would show up at those games, however, she wasn't there that night.
I sent Shannon a couple texts just saying, you know, get a hold of us.
After the basketball game, Clay and the kids went to Shannon's house.
We've walked around the house. I've walked around the house with the kids with a flashlight, looking in there Thursday night.
Okay.
And
And then what happened?
well, we went back to my house.
Okay.
And the kids kept trying to call Shannon, and I think I sent her another text. On Friday, I sent her a text and said, if we don't hear from you by 7 p.m. tonight, I'm gonna call and have the sheriff find you.
Detectives are now able to narrow down the window of time that Shannon was murdered.
Shannon's death probably occurred somewhere on December 1st after 3:17 p.m. and sometime before December 2nd around 9 a.m.
She had a routine of talking to her mother at a specific time in the morning, and that phone call doesn't come. So we begin to operate under the assumption that she was deceased by that particular time.
Investigators check Clay's cell phone records. It corroborates what he told investigators.
He was cooperative during the interview, and he provided a DNA sample voluntarily.
With his alibi having checked out, they ask Clay who he thinks might have wanted to hurt Shannon in such a brutal way.
The thing that he kept saying was, look at her computer, and that'll tell you all you need to know. He said she was doing some online dating, and whoever killed her is in there.
Who did they meet in person? Who did they ghost? Who may be motivated to come after them? Who was not who they said they were? I mean, online dating is the Wild West.
Detectives are working a theory that whoever murdered Shannon Starbuck could be connected to her online dating. They start by scouring her phone, looking for recent dates.
One of the first ones that came up was a guy by the name of Tom. And Tom had sent her some text messages that very day. Tom and Shannon had been flirting back and forth, and it was obvious that they're attracted to one another.
As they continue reading the texts, alarm bells sound.
Tom is encouraging Shannon to send him some kind of racy pictures, and one of the pictures that he asked for is very similar to the pose that we find Shannon's deceased body in.
Is this a coincidence? How is this possible?
That threw up red flags for us. We're thinking he is our suspect.
They track Tom down by calling the number on Shannon's phone.
When we first talked to Tom, we went to his residence. Tom told us he met Shannon through a dating application. They had met, they had communications on the phone and via text. They had not been intimate.
Detectives asked Tom to account for his whereabouts during the time they believe Shannon was murdered.
Tom Walker told us that he left from work approximately 9:40 a.m. to go to a funeral. And then he returned to work at around 10:50 a.m. He said that he had texted her about going to the funeral and asked her how her day was going. She subsequently responded to him a little while later, around 12, asking if he would like to meet her for lunch at that time. She thought it was odd because she knew that he had a funeral to attend to and that he would be at work and would not be able to meet on December 1st. We were able to investigate that and totally corroborate everything he told us. His boss eliminated him by verifying when he was at work, when he went to the funeral, when he came back, and how late he worked that evening. He was nowhere near Shannon's residence on December 1st. Tom also provided us with a DNA sample voluntarily. His DNA was not found on Shannon Starbuck in the place of the injuries.
So we were able to rule Tom out in the death of Shannon Starbuck.
Still believing Shannon's dating history is the key to finding her killer, detectives delve deeper into her personal life.
Similar to going to a bar, for instance, to meet people and not knowing them. Online, you're also potentially connecting with people you don't know. And there is some research to suggest that online dating behavior is associated with increased risk of violence.
So sometime shortly after noon, Shannon text messages the guy by the name of John and appears to be setting up some type of a rendezvous for later in the evening, on the same day as her death.
Detectives set to work finding John Wilson.
We were able to take the photograph off of John's Facebook account, run it through the open source search engine, and we were able to match that photograph with a doctor out of Maryland. Once we contacted that doctor, we were able to verify that that wasn't really a picture of John, and John is just an unknown person who's faking these profiles for the purposes of dating multiple women.
I think 50% of people or more report lying about their profiles or information online. So it begs the question, who are you talking to?
John's fake online presence leads detectives to theorize that he is somehow involved in Shannon's murder.
He's difficult to find, and he's already being untruthful about his identity. He seems to have disappeared into the wind the moment that Shannon Starbuck is murdered. So we thought, John is our guy, because he is being so secretive, he's being so careful to cover his tracks. We reached out to John directly. I sent him both an email and messaged him saying, you need to contact the police. So when John calls me, he is very skeptical. Sounds like he can't really believe that the police are reaching out to him. But I inform him that I'm investigating the death of Shannon Starbuck. His first reaction was that he wanted to consult with an attorney.
When you see a suspect immediately lawyer up, as they say, and engage their attorney, it doesn't necessarily point to guilt, but it points to them having something to hide. No matter what the reason, that would automatically elevate them, in my experience, to someone who requires closer scrutiny.
Detectives ask for the man's real name, but he refuses to give it to them.
And at that time, I scribbled out a quick note saying, hey, tell him he's got 20 seconds, tell us who he is, identify himself, or we're gonna put his photograph out on the media everywhere to find out who he is.
It's called offering the out. And this is frequently where we see they'll cop to something that they wouldn't normally confess to because it's a preferred alternative to what's being insinuated.
At that point, John does give me his true identity, and we make an arrangement to meet the following day with his attorney.
Detectives finally come face to face with their prime suspect, John Kenline.
And so John did lay out the fact that he is married, he has a job that is kind of respected in the community. And yet he's leading this double lifestyle of meeting up with multiple women. And so he doesn't want this to be known. He feels that he's got a lot to lose, potentially his job, his marriage, his own children, his house. Everything is riding on the line. Yet at the same time, he realizes the predicament he's in. He's the #1 suspect in a homicide, so it all has to come out.
If somebody's willing to cheat or lie to their family, they're probably willing to lie to investigators.
Detectives asked John where he was during the time they believe Shannon was murdered.
He told us that he dropped his kids off at school that morning and that he had plans to see Shannon approximately 10:30 a.m. in Deer Park. He drove up to Shannon's house and there was no answer.
He admits that he's been there at the house. He's made phone calls on the day that she is murdered. Everything puts him in the area.
Detectives suspect John Kenline murdered Shannon after a date gone bad.
What crossed my mind was maybe they did meet up and maybe they did have a sexual relationship. Maybe something went wrong. We suspected that John was our killer.
Detectives have zeroed in on John Kenline as the prime suspect in the murder of Shannon Starbuck.
John told us he drove up to Shannon's house and there was no answer. So he utilized some public phones in the Deer Park area and he tried to call her, still didn't get any answer. He actually drove back to her house, still no sign of Shannon, nobody answered the door. He also went around the house knocking on windows and that, there was still no answer.
After he left, Kenline claims he finally heard from Shannon. She texted saying she was out for lunch and was sorry she missed him.
So sometime shortly after noon, Shannon text messages John and appears to be setting up some type of a rendezvous for later in the evening, making plans for that night.
So John went back that evening and tried to meet up with her, and there was no answer.
Detectives are suspicious of John's story.
His own alibi put him at the house during that time frame when Shannon was murdered.
There could be a variety of motivations that John would have in showing up at her house. It could be that she was about to expose him for the charlatan and the fraud that he was. It could be that he felt she had ghosted him and how dare she. It could be that he just wanted to take the relationship to the next level and then found when he was there that, in fact, his fantasies were more twisted maybe than even he knew.
There's just one problem.
At the time, John did provide us with a DNA sample, which we tested along with other samples, and he was eliminated as a contributor to DNA.
The fact John's DNA is ruled out doesn't necessarily mean he's not the killer. Every alibi should be independently corroborated through some secondary source.
John seems to be our #1 suspect. He's just not admitting to having been in the house or having direct contact with her. We still had a lot of investigation to do before we could rule him out.
With John stonewalling them, the investigation hits a wall.
I think it did shock the people of Deer Park as well as the Spokane community. A mother of 5 children murdered inside her own home. No apparent signs of forced entry. Did she answer the door and someone forced her way in? That type of incident without answers scares people.
We had a very serious threat on the streets for the community at large. And that was very stressful for me at the time because I didn't want to miss anything. I wanted to make sure we covered all of our bases and that we were headed in the right direction.
But soon, their hard work pays off.
We always request records directly from the cell phone provider. And in this case, when I was able to get records for Shannon Starbuck's phone, I was able to go through them, and I found a 911 call that was not listed in her call records on her phone. Some cell phones actually mask 911 calls, and that would be if you were a victim and you called 911, as soon as you hang up, the suspect wouldn't be able to grab your phone and see that you had called. So it's kind of a safety feature.
The discovery of the 911 call rocks the investigation.
And I can actually remember standing up at my desk and announcing to all the other detectives in the room, she called 911, and it was extremely exciting. We're working on the premise that Shannon died somewhere in a 24-hour time span. So looking at those phone records, it timestamps 9:17 in the morning as the time that this event is taking place. We're able to verify that with 911, and it was an oh my gosh moment of, we really know when this happened now.
To me and to other investigators, that indicated that that was the time she was attacked.
911, what are you reporting?
And she was killed shortly thereafter.
Hello?
Obviously, this revelation is shocking, and the fact that investigators and hearing this for the first time, I mean, this was under their noses all along. She was essentially in the throes of death.
Detectives have learned that Shannon Starbuck called 911 in distress in the early morning of December 1st, the day she was killed.
So we were unaware up until weeks into the investigation that she had ever called 911. But once we saw it in the phone records, I was able to contact the 911 dispatch center, have them pull the records for that specific date and time, and they found a recording that they didn't know existed.
911, what are you reporting?
When you listen to the recording, you can hear a grunt and a muffled noise in the background that sounds like someone possibly being assaulted.
911, what are you reporting? Hello?
It was eerie in the sense that you knew this is a struggle that's going on and this person's fighting for their life, and it doesn't turn out well. The 911 receiver actually talks at the exact same time that that noise is in the background.
911, what are you reporting?
And it would be my belief that he probably talked over it and didn't realize that there was anyone on the end. He did call the phone number immediately back, but there was no answer. It goes to voicemail because the phone has been shut off or disabled by this time.
Hi, this is Shannon. Please leave a message.
And therefore, there is no further contact.
Almost without exception, in every jurisdiction, 911 hang-up calls are at least a one-officer dispatch.
Would it necessarily have stopped what was occurring? Not likely, but maybe perhaps her killer could have been found much earlier.
The discovery of the 911 call sends the investigation into a whole new direction.
Initially, it appeared that Shannon was most likely alive in the afternoon of December 1st. She's texting to multiple people, both Tom, John, Clay at some point, and the kids as well.
Detectives now believe it was likely Shannon's killer, trying to pretend Shannon was still alive.
Your scope of possible suspects really starts to slim down because now you can check out their alibis and know whether or not it was possible for them to have been involved or not.
With the new evidence, detectives take another look at their prime suspect, John Kenline.
We discovered that at 9:20, he's taking the kids to school. So to me, that's pretty closely ruling John out as being involved in getting back and forth between those locations with the amount of time it would take to go from Spokane to Deer Park. I am now convinced John Kenline was not involved in the murder of Shannon Starbuck.
This is a case that would be and has been extraordinarily frustrating for investigators in that you have some pretty specific crime scene behaviors and a puzzling scene and a number of viable suspects, and nothing is shaking out. The unanswered questions are going to keep you up at night.
After ruling out John Kenline in the murder of Shannon Starbuck, detectives go back to the drawing board.
We're looking at saying, okay, somebody got on her phone and was communicating with John Kenline, was communicating with Tom Walker, was returning messages.
Detectives do a deeper dive into Shannon's personal life and make an alarming discovery.
While I'm talking to the friends of Shannon, they are informing me that Clay has been nothing but trouble for Shannon. He has harassed her, he has done damage to her place, he has done damage to her vehicle, he has threatened her.
He owes her a significant amount of child support. He's a very much controlling person. He's not happy with the fact that she's dating other men, that he has no control over her, and he has been stalking and harassing her for some time.
When it's learned that Clay has been stalking Shannon, it's particularly troubling to me as a psychologist. We know from the research in intimate partner homicides that when stalking's involved, it increases the risk 2 to 3 times that somebody's going to end up murdered.
We discovered she was so concerned about Clay stalking her, essentially, that she did ask for and receive a domestic violence protection order.
Tragically, the use of restraining orders like we see in this case, I mean, it's a piece of paper. The existence of that paper is actually seen by the offender as a voucher to actually act on what they've already been planning. It actually infuriates and escalates their behavior to the point that it has the opposite of the desired effect.
She had told individuals in the community that if something happened to her, if she was harmed or killed, that it was Clay Starbuck that had done it to her.
Based on these new revelations, detectives take a second look at Clay Starbuck.
So Clay had given us a story about his vehicle breaking down and how he had sent some text messages to Shannon to try to get her to take the children to school. And then after his car broke down, he went back to his house and fell asleep. Somewhere in there, he said that his cell phone battery died and his cell phone was off for a majority of the day. And that in itself wasn't contradictory to anything we found in the cell phone records. His phone was actually off for a majority of the day. But when we examine cell phone records frequently, we don't look at just a very small frequent time frame because people live and breathe on their cell phones in this day and age. You develop patterns. So for Clay Starbuck, over a 1-year total of cell phone records were obtained. And what we were able to see was that at no other time over the preceding year has his phone ever been off for the amount of time that it was off on the day that Shannon Starbuck was murdered. He had never in the prior year had text messages sent to him that he didn't respond to in a timely fashion, or go for periods of time where there was no activity. Yet on the day of Shannon Starbuck's murder, all of those things happened.
Detectives meet with Clay, testing his alibi against the new timeline.
We ask him to go for a little ride with us to show us the route that he drove and where his vehicle broke down and how he walked back to his house, which he agreed to do. Now, this is a golf course community, and there are actually greens in between some of these residences. And where the vehicle stalled is across from one of these greens that goes in between these houses and would have been the most likely direct route to walk back to his house. And in this particular December, there isn't a lot of snow. There wasn't anything really impeding someone from taking that route. But Clay insists that he walked down the sidewalk and stayed off of the golf green, at which point he turns and goes east through the neighborhood back to his own residence. We follow this route, and we specifically look for home security cameras, and we find one. We contact the homeowners and ask them if we can look at their security footage, and after looking at the footage numerous times, We cannot once find Clay Starbuck walking past this residence that he claims he walked past 4 times on that day. I questioned him on this at least 2 to 3 times. Are you sure this is the route you've taken? And he is adamant that that's the route he's taken. And now, after looking at the footage from the surveillance video, it's obvious that Clay Starbuck isn't being truthful with us about where he was and what he was doing.
Detectives have now shifted the focus of their investigation in the murder of Shannon Starbuck to her ex-husband, Clay, when a surprising piece of evidence emerges.
DNA that was identified as belonging to male Starbuck lineage was found in the area where Shannon was strangled and suffocated. So it wasn't DNA just found on a ledge or an item of clothing or something that had been there for a while. This was DNA that was found on Shannon Starbuck, where she was injured, part of the cause of her death.
In order to link the killer's DNA left on Shannon's body to Clay, detectives must prove it belongs to him and not one of his sons.
We were able to eliminate the adult male Starbuck children because one of them was at school during that day and the other one was at work. That left us with Clay Starbuck as being the provider of the DNA on Shannon Starbuck.
Closing in on their killer, detectives bring Clay Starbuck down to the station to confront him with the damning evidence.
Clay Starbuck agreed to be interviewed. He waived his rights, so we proceeded with a recorded interview with him.
Part of how we got here today, Clay, is the fact that all of the evidence has lined up to show that you have not been truthful with us to this point. All of the evidence is lined up to show that you were there at the house on that particular day that Shannon died.
Is that no? I can't hear you. No? No, don't sit here and tell me you weren't there, because we have the proof that you were there, okay?
No, I've been in that house probably 30 times.
Okay, it's not about the house.
It's not about the house, and
It's not about the house. How did your DNA get on her neck and her face and under her fingernails?
You say my DNA was there under her fingernails and around her mouth. I don't have any scratches or bruises. You guys looked at me for that. I didn't do that.
I said, I understand that, Clay, but let me go get something. I went and grabbed the lab report, and I showed it to him.
This is the laboratory report that indicates your DNA was under her fingernails, was on her neck, and on her face.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I just
Okay.
have a problem believing it.
your DNA is there because you murdered Shannon.
He started breathing heavy. He was almost hyperventilating.
I'm not doing very well right now.
You're not doing very well because you're under arrest for murder. I agree with you. You're not doing very well right now.
At that point, he shut down. He didn't make any more statements.
Detectives arrest Clay Starbuck and charge him with the murder of his wife, Shannon.
Sadly, Shannon's fatal mistake was daring to start a new life without Clay. And it really drove him crazy. Clay killed Shannon, I think, because he was jealous and he did not want to have to pay her child support every month. And at the time of the murder, he owed her more than $9,000. And so it appears that Clay decided that he could get out of these financial problems by simply killing her.
Detectives now believe they know what happened to Shannon Starbuck in the last 24 hours of her life.
December 1st, around 8 a.m., Clay text messages Shannon, asks her to take the children to school. Most likely during the time frame that she's away from the house, taking the children to school, Clay has snuck into the house and he lays in wait for her while she is going about her morning routine.
While Clay is waiting for Shannon to return home, he turns off his cell phone.
Shortly after getting back to the house, he attacks her. She attempts to call 911, but that call is cut short.
911, what are you reporting?
And her phone is turned off. And then he murders her through a struggle, strangulation. He positions her in a humiliating fashion for the rest of the community to be aware of after the fact, and makes her look like the bad person because she's doing some online dating and things that he doesn't necessarily approve of.
After she was attacked, I believe Clay got on her phone and on her computer and started looking through it and communicating back with these individuals, trying to frame either Tom Walker or John Kinline as being the ones that committed the murder.
Clay then returns home, turns on his cell phone, and waits for his kids to get home from school.
Clearly, this festering jealousy had led him to the point where he was prepared to commit murder, but at the same time, he was able to keep things under control and keep his behavior premeditated and organized enough that he uses these texts to artificially engineer this alibi.
It's Thursday Shannon's day. Right? So
Okay.
I'm the guarantee. I'm the go-to guy on taking him to school. So, but Thursday, the car's dead. I'm getting that going back and forth. And at 3:30 on Thursday, she says something like, I just got up. Can you get the kids? But my phone wasn't on.
For me, I also wonder, is there an element of sadism here? Is there a deeper quality to him that really wants to have Shannon experience pain and suffering?
Clay Starbuck is found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Clay definitely planned this out. There was a significant amount of premeditation, and I think that someone that can be that calculating and that terrible to any other human being, spending the rest of his life in prison is definitely what he deserved.
It's horrendous, but not just because of what happened to Shannon. It's what it did to this family. When Clay Starbuck killed Shannon, he robbed their children of their mother, and then because of his life sentence, he robbed his children of a father. It was a selfish act based in greed and jealousy, and it just didn't have to happen.